Well, hey, it seems to be conference week. I don't know if you've been paying attention to any of the stuff that's going on out there, but there are a lot of conferences like all happening right now.
There are, and I've gotten so many like emails and saying, hey, and like your text when you were like, oh, this person's going to be, at this one. I'm like, God, I want to listen to all of these people, but damned if I don't have meetings
Of
scheduled.
course, yeah.
Damn work in the way.
So, well, luckily, like the ones that I was talking about for the Arc Record conference, it's totally free. I'd probably still register for it. They are all being recorded, so you can watch them
Oh, good,
after
good.
the fact. So I'm going to be speaking at a conference tomorrow,
Ooh.
and it's the Advancing Computational Design Conference, which got rescheduled like 2 or 3 times this year. Obviously, for everybody knows why. They eventually kind of decided that it was going to be virtual. I think that was painful for them, but looking forward to that. I'll be presenting on how to get leadership and internal buy-in on computational design tools for various reasons tomorrow morning.
Oh,
And
cool.
there's a lot of great speakers at the Advancing Computational Design conference. So I don't remember if it was free or not, but I'll see what I can find out. Maybe we could put something in the show notes. But the one that I watched yesterday that I was messaging you about was the Jeanne Gang lecture for the Arc Record Innovation
Ooh,
Conference.
yeah.
But there was also some other great lectures too. So we should probably put the link to that in the show notes. But David Adjaye, he spoke yesterday, and Frank Gehry's going to speak today. So they did bring in kind of some big names. And what I thought was interesting was that Jeanne Gang's lecture as a keynote speaker, it wasn't like really high level. It wasn't. It was about what they are doing in their practice, which I thought was pretty cool because it was more like, because the AIA conference didn't happen this year, I'm used to kind of thinking about it from that mindset, which is like, and now we're going to talk about how great architects are, and we're going to, get into some of the details about what the profession is struggling with. But it was, this was more MDC style, which was about the work that they're doing. And I thought it would be cool to talk about hers for a minute because it's the main one that I caught. I caught just a couple minutes of David Adjaye's and Thomas Pfeiffer's. I need to go back and watch those because Thomas Pfeiffer was talking about the museum in Poland that he's doing or is done. It's almost done, I guess. And then David spoke about a bunch of his projects as well. And they seem to be really well received just by kind of skimming the chat, because attendees can do a live chat while it's going on, which is pretty cool. And I'm sure that just stays there. Even if you're watching it afterwards, you can kind of catch up on what people were kind of reacting to during the thing. But she had a pretty cool idea behind hers. So I thought maybe we could take a couple minutes to talk about that.
Sure.
That would be
I
cool.
mean,
Yeah, because you
my,
basically
mine's
said
a,
you're going to have to catch me up.
exactly. I mean, mine's only going to be reactions from what you say, like, ooh,
Yeah.
because I unfortunately have not had a chance to take a look at it or catch the recording. When you had sent me the text, I was just like, oh man, is it do door contacts and miscellaneous hardware and ratings and things like that?
The
Does that really
glamorous
matter?
life of an architect.
Exactly. Let's see.
Oh
What do
man.
I want to do more?
Yeah. I think the choice is obvious, but you made the right choice. You stuck with your team, and you picked the right hardware.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all right. So her main thesis was that architects should act at the urban level a lot more and think as urban designers. And she said, and I think a lot of this context is coming out of her hometown of Chicago, where they do a majority of their practice. Obviously, they have national and international projects as well. But she was talking about design kind of at the block by block level, not big urban design, right? But kind of manageable urban design, and really talking about how your project basically ripples out and affects its community. So can a good building change a neighborhood, right? That's kind of the thesis behind this. And one of the stats she threw out was like, if we started to think about this at more of a block by block level, there's the ratio is 1 to 3,000, at least in her demographic area there. So or geographic area. So it was one architect for every 3,000 people.
Hmm.
So if you think about it kind of on those terms, I mean, we're pretty well positioned and well trained to be the type of role that can kind of look at it. This is kind of like a powers of 10 kind of a thing, right? It's like,
Right.
how do you zoom out? How do you get beyond your project? How do you get beyond your property lines to really think about the neighborhoods and the communities that could be affected by your project rather than just what's happening on your site? So I thought that was a pretty interesting thesis. I mean, it's something that we're talking about a lot in our practice, which is, if our mission is to make our communities better, how are we measuring that? Because if you just simply measure it by the one building or what happens in the one building, are you really measuring community impact? Right. And I think that's a totally valid question that we all should be asking. If we really think that architects can change the world, are we going to do it inside the property lines, or are we going to let it get outside of the property lines? Right. So it's a really great thesis. I thought it was really great timing, especially for some of the thinking that we've been doing in our practice, because I think there's lots of ways you could measure it. But like she talked about, they did this fire station, and then while they were doing this fire station, basketball courts popped up next to the fire station, and some new housing went in. So clearly, it became kind of this center of activity because of one new project, or maybe it's one rehabilitation or something. It starts to kind of create momentum, right? Property values could go up, pride could go up. These are things that you could actually kind of measure by doing surveys,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one of the interesting things that we've worked on in the past are when we do renovations to, say there's an older school within a community, and, it's kind of had like child population kind of like ebbs and flows. And so now they're on a flow side of things, and revitalizing it, bringing it into the, school of the 21st century type direction. There aren't very many social services or recreational services or things like that in the adjacent community to help serve that community. And a lot of times we've looked at things like adding a rec center to, or utilizing the school gym and some of the school facilities as a after hours,
like a
recreation center
amenity.
and things. Exactly. And even community-based health centers within the school, things like that, offering up opportunities for, healthcare at the school for underserved community. Yeah, exactly, for underserved communities. And so those are, I know, in some cases baby steps, but they are baby steps that, like you said, lead to other things. You see this like, oh, there, this particular project that we're working on now. I mean, the development that the hospital is doing around the community, it's seen its ebbs and flows as well. It was, the historic campus of the hospital, and, located in the core heart of Baltimore, seen its, economic decline. And what it's helping is elevate the area around it by being spur on more development around the area, trying to pull in more development around like healthcare, bringing in businesses. Then you start to see, okay, so now you've got the hospital. Then you've got like, almost like these doctors' offices that pop up around hospitals. Then, you start to see, small clinics or other businesses that serve those areas. Then, in this particular case, in East Baltimore, there's now a community park. Now developers are actually investing in, some of the housing that's around there to offer multi levels of income, housing and things like that. And so, the one project may be one project, but it is kind of that impetus, as you said, to the broader thing. And so it's good that this is a conversation that they're having, that we all are having.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's interesting too is like kind of the next level of her presentation, where they actually talked about the work they're doing kind of proactively with their cities and their neighborhoods, working with mayors to get kind of, demographics, crime rates, looking, then kind of, again, zooming out, kind of powers of 10 type stuff, and doing diagrams and mapping of cities. And obviously you're going to be able to identify locations of opportunities. You're going to be able to identify locations for retrofits, where you could turn this building into a community resource, and looking for areas of, low lighting, where can they reduce crime? Because often, a big concern is or a way to address the big concern of crime is to put in these giant LED floodlights, right, which are just garish. They're always the wrong color temperature. So instead, kind of like coming up with maybe their prefab design solutions or design ideas around parasols and lanterns, and creating environments that people want to hang out in because they're safe, right? By creating kind of this level of safety, but they're also beautiful and they become an amenity for the community rather than just like a giant floodlight, right? That just nobody wants to be around because it just doesn't feel right, right? So they did they kind of partnered with, they did partner with the city to basically be proactive and do these studies and show the city what's possible. So they served the city, right? Like they turned into this. It wasn't about them. It was about how can we make our community better? And then based on some of the things that they proposed, the city actually released RFPs for that stuff and then hired architects to solve those problems, right? Based on actually seeing that those studies could produce results, right? Because the city wants to reduce crime rates, for instance, right? Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool because basically they're helping identify, they're not even doing it to get the work necessarily, but they're doing it to make their communities better, realizing that there's probably enough work for everybody. So pretty cool tactic to kind of go in and do that and make their communities better.
Well, it's also good that, lectures like this expose the architectural community into just seeing the ideas of other architects, say, oh, hey, I'd like to do that in my community, or hey, I live in that community, I'd like to get involved.
Yeah, totally. Or and think bigger than yourself. I thought it was a really inspiring kind of message that was going on there for sure. And then the last thing that, she actually talked about a few projects and how a building could be a good neighbor, like thinking about your building that way, where she was talking about the carved tower that's on the High Line in New York and how they basically challenged the zoning laws because the zoning as prescribed was, it was not good for the neighborhood. It was, and because it's old and it didn't take all of this stuff into account. So they basically totally challenged it and inverted the existing kind of zoning to make something what they considered was better for everybody. And they showed via diagrams and data, and then that it could serve that location better with this other type of zoning. And they said it took quite a bit of work, right, to get it through there. But I thought that was interesting. So anyway, the carved tower, it looks like an interesting kind of case study for this because it really was about being a good neighbor to its direct context. And then the last one that I thought was cool was they, doing it themselves. So on their office, and again, kind of taking this back into this block by block micro urbanism idea that she presented in the beginning was to something that they did on their building was they put a green roof on their own building and they call it the eco roof. And they were pretty strategic about placing plant species from the region, doing bird safe glazing, creating places, for beehives so that they could attract insects and produce their own honey. And what was cool about it was out of this, kind of amenity that they made for their own group of people to do some R&D and kind of understand the ecology that can be created on roofs. They do a data blitz every year where they actually bring in scientists and they measure the soil microbes, they measure the number of types of insects, and then they're charting all of the growth of the taxa over the years. Which then kind of impacts air quality in that location, right? They've installed these purple air sensors to measure air quality. So it's not just like, is the air getting better? I think so, right? It's like they're measuring it, but their goal is to influence their neighbors, right? So that their neighbors want to put in a green roof, and they're basically showing through the data the benefits of it to help make the case of why others should do it as well. And they're seeing the activity and they're seeing kind of the excitement around this, and it's just on display based on maybe it's their location, maybe it's the group of people who are in that area on a day-to-day basis, but their goal is to kind of like good ideas spread, right? So How can we prove it ourselves, put it on display, and then have others, start to build off of that and maybe create a green roof corridor that spreads down the streets. And then it starts to kind of exponentially allow those ideas to make an impact out there in their community. Super cool, right? I mean, it's like, wow.
Absolutely. So did you, because as you're explaining it to me, my head is just flooding with just like imagery and ideas and things like that. I mean, I'm assuming that as you were watching it,
they had a lot of beautiful diagrams. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. It was great.
And just
photos.
the image evoking, kind of like imagination evoking.
Yes.
Just commentary of it. And just, proving or providing raw data so that people really kind of know, hey, this really does work. This can work. This is what, we should be doing.
Yeah.
Those are all pretty fantastic.
I think what's special about it is that they're not just talking about it, and it's not just presenting ideas. They're actually doing it. They're doing it on their own work. I mean, I should say they're doing it on their own building, and they're doing it in their work. And obviously, this presentation was kind of tailored around this larger idea of microurbanism and different ways that you could strategically go and go after that. But because those buildings do other things too, I'm sure that you could present on many other angles. But in this particular case, I felt like it was really inspiring about how architects can make impacts in their communities if they think bigger than their footprint of their building that their clients are building. So pretty cool.
Yeah. That's yeah.
Well, anyway,
and the good thing is that other architects are doing it as well.
Yeah, and we should put the link to this in the show notes so that people can watch this themselves. But I thought it was pretty cool, pretty inspiring. So I think that's all we have time for in this one. But that was definitely highly recommended from my point of view.
I love it. I will follow the show notes and watch the lectures.